Hey again, Honors Bio. This is going to be, this is video, well, this is the third video in this unit. We're going to call it video 2B. This is the actual description of your four macromolecules. All right, we're going to start with carbs. Carbs is going to be our longest one, so that's what we're going to start with. Okay, the function of carbs. It's the main source of energy for living things. This is the energy that we use quickly. If I ask you to define the function of carbs, I need you to make sure you describe that it's the energy that we're going to use right away. It's not, we're not storing it long term. Okay, carbs, they're made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in ratios of 1 to 2 to 1. If you see a molecule that has a carbon, 2 hydrogens, and an oxygen, and you have 3 or more of those, you're probably looking at a carbohydrate. And your body needs a constant supply of carbohydrates. When we don't have carbohydrates readily available in our blood, what our blood does is it will take fat, transfer it into carbs, and then your body will process it, turn it into carbs, and then use it just like you had, readily available carbs in your body. So we always want to use our carbs up first. All right, so here are monomers for carbohydrates and polymers for carbohydrates, okay? Monosaccharide, mono means one, it's a simple sugar. You can't break it down smaller than monomers. And when you put your monomers together through the process of dehydration synthesis or condensation reactions or polymerization, you get polymers. Polysaccharide would be the polymer for monosaccharides. And then make sure you write down these examples too. When we have simple sugars, they create starch. Glucose put together creates glycogen. Galactose creates another version of starch. And fructose, when put together, creates cellulose. Make sure you write those down. You can kind of make yourself a little chart if you want, monomers and polymers. Okay, 3 types of sugars. We're going to start with monosaccharides. Remember, this is your monomer. It's going to have at least 2 hydroxide groups, OH, bonded to a carbon backbone. Examples are galactose, glucose, and fructose. So you can see here, it's like it's a 6 carbon backbone, right? It's a 6 carbon sugar, and then the carbons are put together like a little backbone here. And then they have, here's your OHs on the outside. Yeah, remember carbon kind of makes the spine of our macromolecules. And then fructose is just a little bit different. You can see a little bit of a different molecule up here at the top, but still the same carbon backbone. Now, when I put monosaccharides together, I can form disaccharides. Remember, di means 2, so this is 2 sugars. Sucrose is a disaccharide made out of a glucose and a fructose. Lactose, like you find in dairy, is a disaccharide made out of glucose and galactose. And then maltose is made out of a glucose and a glucose. So these are 3 examples of disaccharides. So that's a polymer that we make out of the monomer, monosaccharides. Now polysaccharides, these are the big ones. Okay, polysaccharides are when we process a large amount of monosaccharides, and they can be in huge chains. You can see from anywhere to 100 to 1,000, and they contain a lot of energy. Animals store excess sugar as what we call glycogen or starch. It's like the step before we're going to store it as fat. And there's a lot of energy, a ton of energy stored in those. That would be maybe closer to the chain of 1,000 monomers. And then plants store it as starch or cellulose. Cellulose is one of the carbohydrates that plants use to make their cell walls. So there's a lot of energy in this one, my friends. Lots and lots and lots of energy. All right, this is your second macromolecule. They're called lipids. Now, lipids are made of 2 monomers. They're called a glycerol head and a fatty acid tail. For the most part, when you are looking at, for this class, I need you to know that the 2 monomers for it are a glycerol head and a fatty acid tail. When you guys go on to maybe like a microbiology class in college, you'll learn a little bit more about the different parts of a lipid. But for our sake right now, I need you to know these are the 2 parts, okay? Here's my glycerol head, fatty acid tail, fatty acid tail. And look at that carbon backbone. Beautiful straight carbon backbone. All right, lipids, their big function is to store energy. Now, this is storing energy long term, not short term. 4 types we're going to talk about are fats, oils, waxes, and steroids. The energy is stored in their bonds, and you guys can see this is a much larger molecule. We can store a lot of energy in this lipid. And that's what we have fat for, to store energy. All right, so let's talk about 2 types of fats. Unsaturated, which is right here, and saturated, which is off to the right. Unsaturated fats are going to stay liquid at room temperature, like vegetable oil or mineral oil or baby oil, olive oil. Those are usually come from plants, so we call those unsaturated fats. And they're a little bit more flexible, so that's why they can remain a liquid at room temperature. Now, saturated fats only contain a single bond. You can see right here they're saturated with hydrogen, okay? They don't have, you can see there's not as many hydrogens here in your unsaturated as you have in your saturated. And this one's always going to stay solid at room temperature. Okay, think Crisco, think lard, anything like that, that's going to stay solid. So I always think saturated is solid. Phospholipids. Phospholipids are the lipids that help to keep our cells from disintegrating. So they have your, you have 2 tails here. Okay, so you have 2 fatty acid tails, and then you have a head right here. Okay, hydrophilic head, that means that it's waterproof. Hydrophobic tail means it's not waterproof. So here is an example of your cell membrane. You've got the waterproof outside that helps to protect your cell, and it also helps to, it holds on to enzymes and protein channels that let things in and out of your cell. Okay, so you need to know that phospholipids they're an example of lipids. And we're going to talk more about what does hydrophobic and hydrophilic mean when we get to Unit 3. Another example of lipids are triglycerides, okay? 3 glycerides. If you've ever heard your parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles ever get their triglycerides taken, this is what they're testing for. And it is exactly what it means. We've got 1 big glycerol head here and 3 fatty acid tails. Okay, they're a huge energy source, stored as fat cells in fat tissue or adipose tissue, and they provide insulation and cushion. Animals that you ever hear having like blubber or a large amount of insulation, like say a penguin or a polar bear or a walrus, they're going to have a lot of glycerol. I mean, they're going to have a lot of triglycerides, I'm sorry, because they help to provide, they're a really big macromolecule, so they're going to provide a lot of insulation and cushion. Waxes. Waxes are long-chain fatty acids bonded to long-chain alcohols or carbon rings. They're very hard. They help repel water. Plants have a lot of waxes in them. Our skin and hair usually consists partly or is covered in waxes. Bird feathers and beehives are also examples of waxes. Okay. Excuse me. They're very waterproof. Think your chapstick. Okay, your chapstick or your, Burt's Bees lip balm made out of waxes. Sterols, this is your last lipid. Okay, now sterols have a very rigid backbone of these carbon rings right here. So rather than just the individual carbons, we actually have like a carbon ring. Examples would be cholesterol, common in animals. Bile salts, which actually they're a sterol, they're a lipid that helps you digest fat. Steroids, or sex hormones, not the illegal kind, but the kind of steroids that help you to grow and change. And they are really important, so they have a very strong carbon backbone to help them get the information that they have to the place in your body where they need to go. There's a reason why they're considered a lipid. They have a very strong sort of hydrophilic protection around them. And then vitamin D is also protected by sterols. Oh, sorry, I want to lose you fast. Okay, you got protein, nucleic acids, and then you're done, guys. Okay, third one is protein. Proteins contain nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. The monomers are called amino acids. An example of a monomer would be a peptide. Okay, so when we put more than one peptide together, we get a polypeptide. So when you have an amino acid, that's a monomer. A polypeptide is a polymer. And the thing that links them together is something called a peptide bond. So you can see here, this picture is just an example of, this is the 2 monomers connected by the peptide bond in the center. Protein function, they control reaction rates. Those are called enzymes. Enzymes help us to speed up or slow down reactions in our body. They control cell processes. They help to form bone and muscle. They help to fix things. They help to fight disease like a white blood cell. They help to take things and transport them in and out of cells. Proteins are basically like the workers of our cells. They build everything in our body. So nucleic acids has like the directions. Protein is the one that actually kind of does the building and has the raw materials. All right, nucleic acids, this is your last one. They contain all the other lovely stuff we had, plus a little phosphorus, okay? We call it a phosphate when it's in its compound. So this is a nucleic acid. You've got a deoxyribose sugar. This whole little thing is a nucleotide. This is your monomer right here. And when we put nucleotides together, we get something like DNA or RNA. So when you put a bunch of these little things together, you get that lovely, you know, that twisted ladder. I know this artwork is probably just so phenomenal, you can hardly stand it. So in the middle, you guys these are like your little nucleotides. Okay, so these are the little parts that make up the actual twisted ladder. So they consist of a 5-carbon sugar, a phosphate group, and a nitrogen base. And when we put each one of those nucleotides together, we can form a nucleic acid like DNA or RNA. Big function here is to store and transmit genetic information. DNA is the big one. That's the one that's inside your cells. And then RNA, we're going to learn about second semester, is just a little bit of information that travels all around your cell. All right, and some questions to think about. What are the 4 macromolecules? What does it mean to be organic? What are the common elements that bond with carbon? What's a polymer and a monomer? And what are the monomers and polymers for carbohydrates? I asked this question because those are I gave you the majority of your examples for carbs. For monomers and polymers were in carbohydrates, and sometimes they're the trickiest to remember, so make sure you review that. And that is the end of part 2B, monomers and polymers.